Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's 10-Minute Tales. This is called Barney's Final Shift, a short story by Harry Riley. This story is fiction, and resemblance to anyone living or dead is coincidental. She harassed and begged him on bended knees not to go. He didn't really have to do this final shift, and with a new baby on the way it was far too dangerous in that condemned mine. Barney Meadows listened intently to all that Euphemia Effie said, but was deaf to his wife's pleas. He would go to prove his solidarity with his comrades. He would go because they expected him to. He was a miner through and through, knocking back the pints in the miners' welfare with the lads, playing the cornet in the brass band, attending all the union meetings, and racing his pigeons every weekend. He was the liveliest and most cheerful member of the coalface crew. He would go because the pit was closing down in this year of 1963, right after his shift. Closing, and he would go because he had a special job to do. He had to kill someone. Stuart Hibbert was Barney's best pal. They were inseparable, growing up together, going to the same school and getting into the same scrapes with the local police. They worked together, operating the giant drill at the face, shared virtually everything together, and 3 months ago Stuart had missed a shift, owing to a stomach upset. It was as Barney was returning home, tired and weary, that a young female neighbour stopped him in the street, and told him Stuart had spent several hours with Effie that day, when he was claiming sickness. Now it seemed the two men were sharing Effie's favours, and the more Barney fretted and fumed over this deceit, the more convinced he became that their expected baby was not his. As they went down in a cage together, Barney knew one of them would not be returning. He would pick his moment when Jake, the third member of their face crew, was hauling back the loaded truck, and then he would strike. Stuart wouldn't know what hit him, better than he deserved, for betraying a trust. Barney would have walked through water for him, and now he had to pay like all treacherous dogs. There was a weak roof prop at the face, and before Jake got back with the empty trucks, Barney, having rendered Stuart unconscious, would have smashed it down, causing a roof collapse over the body. The hours ticked slowly away, and then came the moment for action. A single blow to the back of the neck from Barney's concealed crowbar sent Stuart crashing to the floor. Jake was well out of earshot, and it was a moment's work to disable the timber roof support. At first nothing happened, and then came a mighty roar as tons of earth came thundering down. It took Barney by surprise as it started behind him, and then the two of them were trapped. As he listened he could hear more cave-ins rumbling in the distance, and realised rescuers would not get to them before the remaining air gave out. He bent over Stuart's inert body and could hear no sound of breathing. It struck so violently that his one-time friend appeared to be dead. Eventually the thunderous earth movement ceased and all was quiet. It was after about an hour or so that he heard voices. At first he thought he was hallucinating, and then they came again quite close. Were they the spirits of long-dead miners? He remembered then that their shaft had been sunk not far away from the Deepbrook mine, closed about 30 years ago after a tragic loss of life due to an underground gas explosion. These voices sounded strange though and guttural, unlike the Nottinghamshire accents he was used to. He started shouting "Help me," and then louder "Help me." The voices went quiet and he knew he'd been heard. He shouted again and again for assistance, and was answered by other voices, and then someone shouted they would get him out. 3 hours later he was a free man. He was dragged out of a small hole created by other miners, who then filled up the gap again with rubble, and hauled it up to ground level in an antiquated cage affair. The Nottinghamshire supervisor explained they were coming out of the old Deepbrook mine, and said that Barney had been rescued by overseas workers. They got away with it so far because nobody ever came near the place. He was sworn to secrecy and asked to remain missing, presumed dead. As he had committed murder, Barney was not averse to the scheme, and said he would not endanger their plans. He quietly left the district and settled down in Yorkshire under an assumed name, and found work as a miner. But as the years passed, he began to wonder what Effie was doing and how the growing child was getting on. It was no good. He had to go back and find out. It was evening and quite dark as he knocked at the door of the end terrace in the dingy mining village. The place seemed even more run down than he remembered, and the few shops were shuttered and barred. A light came on in the front room, and the door was opened by Effie, looking greyer, but hardly any different with the passage of time. She almost fainted at the image of him standing in the doorway. He made a grab to steady her from the shop. "It's really me, Effie, I'm not a ghost." He followed her inside and sat her down with a glass of water. When she had recovered, she had a couple of shocks for him too. The baby had grown into a strong boy she'd called young Barney, and sitting by the fireside in a wheelchair was Stuart Hibbert. She explained Stuart had eventually been rescued and spent a long time in hospital, where he never recovered from brain damage incurred in the accidental roof collapse. They assumed Barney had perished under the tons of rubble. There was no sign of recognition from Stuart as Barney studied his silent, wasted form. Effie said she had taken the invalid in because he had no one else to care for him. Barney explained he had been helped by workers from the Deepbrook mine and asked if she knew anything about them. Effie said the police raided the site several weeks after the accident and found the men had already fled. Barney admitted he had not returned immediately so as not to give his rescuers away, and he quizzed Effie on her previous behaviour with Stuart. She sighed bitterly and said he had come round in secret to arrange a special party that Barney's friends were to give him on the birth of the baby. They'd all chipped in, including the brass band members, to wet the baby's head, with a splendid do at the miners' welfare. She said the neighbour who tipped off Barney about her so-called affair with Stuart was envious, because it was widely known she couldn't have kids of her own. Barney, older and wiser now, knew he couldn't resume his old life in the village, so he willingly cajoled them, including Stuart, to go and live with him in his new home in Yorkshire. End.